Hello and welcome to the third episode of our Minecraft speedrunning tutorial series. It's been a minute since the last episode due to some life factors of mine, but I'm glad to finally release this episode to you guys. In the previous episode, we spoke about all of the different bastion types, as well as how to find them, navigate towards them, and route them. As always, this episode will assume you did watch that whole episode on bastions, and that link will be in the description. Just wanted to also say that these tutorials take quite a bit of time to make, and even though last episode was around 80 minutes long, there were still some key things I missed talking about that I will hopefully brush up on in this episode, as well as potentially in a more advanced Bastion video coming after this tutorial series. Regardless, if you enjoy these tutorials, your like and subscribe would be very appreciated. Thank you so much for sticking through with me, and let's get right into it. So, let's say we just finished our bastion. We have around 16 ender pearls at least, 20 obsidian, around 48 to 60 string, and a couple fire resistance potions. What do we do next? It's time to find the fortress. Recall that for the speedrun, the two goals you have in the Nether was first the bastion and then the Nether Fortress. The fortress is the second half of the Nether split, so you can really call this tutorial episode the Nether Part 2. In this video, we will cover all remaining information on the Nether, its biomes, the fortress, as well as calculation, so we can make our way to the Stronghold. So, we're in a bastion, we have all of our loot, so obviously we want to find the fortress now. In some cases, the fortress is actually visible from the bastion, so this whole process can be more or less omitted. But on most seeds, you won't know where the fortress is. So let's talk a little bit about how fortresses and bastions both spawn in the Nether. Before we talk about Nether fortresses themselves, the first thing we'll talk about is the logic in which they spawn as well as how to find them. This segment of the video will also explain the way bastions spawn, so this is applicable for them as well. In Minecraft, there exists an underlying mechanic tied to every single structure in the game that controls the way that they spawn, and this is known as structure regions. Essentially, regions for structures are, in a way, slices of the world that permit a set amount of structures to spawn inside of them, ensuring that structures don't spawn on top of each other and have some type of logic for spreading out in the world. This mechanic also exists in the Nether, and it turns out that the spawning regions for bastions and Nether fortresses both are the same, and end up being squares of about 400 blocks, starting from the 0,0 coordinate. Picture the Nether like this. This is the 0,0 coordinate, and let's start drawing out these spawning regions. These are cuts of squares that are around 400 by 400 blocks, 25-ish chunks each. In the speedrunning community, these regions are commonly referred to as quadrants, and are denoted by the number signs of both the x and z coordinates. Positive positive, positive negative, negative positive, and negative negative. From the Minecraft wiki, this is how it literally looks, with the exact region values. In each of these quadrants, only one bastion or one fortress can spawn, or neither. So this means if you're in a bastion and look at your coordinates, you can actually determine which quadrant you are currently in, and can thus deduce that for the entirety of the quadrant that you're in, a fortress cannot be there. The alternative is also true. If you saw a fortress in a quadrant, a bastion can never be in that quadrant either. So, in order to give a sort of visual representation about how these Nether regions work for spawning bastions and fortresses, let's first go into a totally random Nether seed and take a look at our coordinates inside of this bastion. Judging by the fact that our x and z coordinates are both positive, I can reasonably deduce that this bastion is currently within the positive quadrant. And I'll put a little marker on the map of our diagram to show where we currently are. If we went in this direction east, towards positive x, towards positive z, just want to say next to the northwest east-south indicator, it shows you the direction of positive or negative z and x where you're facing towards, so it's a nice visual indicator of the direction that you want to go towards. So if we went further into positive x and positive z, then we would never encounter a fortress or a bastion in this direction, because we already have this bastion in the positive quadrant. So, if we want to put this theory to the test about these nether regions, then we are first going to go west towards negative x and get into the negative positive region. So now that we are in the negative positive region, let's go ahead and do /locate a bastion, and look at that, we have a bastion in the negative positive region, negative 320, 96. And if we go all the way to that direction and take a look here, we are currently pretty comfortably within the negative positive region, as denoted by our diagram. And as you can see, our first bastion was over there, but our second bastion is now over here. So as we are filling up our little diagram here, let's now go north towards negative z and see if we can find another nether structure here, either a bastion or a fortress. Let's do /locate a bastion, and look at that. There is no bastion here in this quadrant, but if we wanted to search for a fortress, look at this. We got a fortress at negative 416, negative 416. As you can see, we have a fortress in the negative quadrant, basically at the far corner of our diagram. If you want to show it like this over here, as you can see, we have 2 bastions and 1 fortress, and now we're 3 quadrants we checked. So, if we want to push this theory to the limit and go all the way towards positive x and get to positive negative region, then we search for one more structure. This should pretty much complete our example. So, we are now in the positive negative region. Let's go ahead and locate a bastion. Oops. Okay, so that's pointing us to the previous bastion, so no bastion in positive negative quadrant. Wanted to do /locate fortress. Wow, would you look at this? We have a positive negative fortress at 192, negative 224. As you can see, for all 4 of our quadrants, we actually got a structure. But, just to note, there will never be any duplicates of any structure in one region. Remember, each region can only have 1 fortress or 1 bastion. We got a little bit lucky with this example, as some quadrants can have neither a fortress or a bastion, because that is a possibility. There's no rule that dictates at least one of them always has to spawn in a quadrant, but only one or the other will spawn in any case. And as you can see by our diagram, our nether in the 4 quadrants has 2 bastions and 2 fortresses like that. This is, in a nutshell, the logic behind how bastions and fortresses spawn in the nether. So with this information, we can now begin scanning for fortresses. In order to perform a scan for fortresses, we'll have to visit our old friend the pie graph yet again. Recall that we used this pie graph in order to find buried treasures, so our menu is likely going to be in the buried treasure menu showing block entities for us. But the thing is, the fortress scan also uses the pie graph, but in a totally different pie graph menu. Press 0 enough times to get back to the root directory or the main menu of the pie graph, and from here, press the numbers for tick, level, entities, block entities. This pie graph menu works entirely different from the previous one for buried treasures, which showed entities as they appeared in your FOV. This new pie chart menu actually shows the block entities that load in your render distance around you, and it distinguishes between them, actually letting us see mob spawners as this cyan color. In the entire nether dimension, mob spawner blocks only have 2 possible reasons for existing. One is the Nether Fortress, because of the blaze spawners that we are after. The other is actually the treasure bastion type, because of the magma cube spawner I mentioned in the previous tutorial. So, seeing a mob spawner in this pie menu is an indication of either a fortress or a treasure bastion. To begin, if you open up your pie graph to this fortress scan menu and increase your render distance and see the spawner show up, you can start beginning the scanning process. In order to actually figure out the direction of the spawner that's showing up, you first need to lower your render distance to the point where the spawner is no longer being detected. This is the first step. Recall how with buried treasures you needed to refresh your pie chart with Shift F3 again in order to make it undetect spikes? Well, the mob spawner in this pie menu will actually not stop being detected unless your render distance is 4 chunks less from the chunk where it was being detected. In other words, for a hypothetical example, say the spawner is 16 chunks away. You raise your render, and at 16 chunks, the spawner shows up. In this case, the spawner will stop being scanned by your pie chart if your render is now 12 chunks and you refresh it. That makes sense? The difference of 4 results in it not being scanned anymore. There are 2 hotkeys that you can use that will make this process easier. F3 plus F is a hotkey that increases your render distance one at a time, while Shift F3 plus F will lower your render distance one at a time. If you raise your render and found a spawner, start lowering your render distance once at a time like this with Shift F3F, and refresh it every time you do so with Shift F3. Do this until you find the exact render distance that removed the spawner from being scanned. And remember, this should always happen at 4 chunks less of the render distance for the spawner. Meaning if you now raise your render by 3, you are 1 chunk away from having that particular mob spawner show up again on your pie graph. Now, enable chunk borders with F3 plus G. Since we are now 1 render distance away from the spawner showing up, if you walk into and check these side chunks near the one that you're in, one of them will show the mob spawner again. This happens because the direction you picked is the direction of where the mob spawner was being scanned from initially. This method we just performed essentially helps us find the render distance that is 1 chunk away from where the spawner is located, and we simply load it in by checking each side chunk. This is because as you move in Minecraft, your render distance moves with you, as a large circle that loads in chunks you walk towards as well as unloading chunks that you walk away from. That's essentially how render distance just works. This is how you find the direction of the fortress in Minecraft speedrunning. Alright everybody, so I am just in a totally random position in the nether, just loaded into a brand new nether seed, and I absolutely don't know which way the fortress is at, so let's go ahead and get to it. Currently we're in our buried treasure area of the pie graph, so you spam 0, go back to the center or the main menu, and from here you click tick, level, entities, block entities, and look, we already see a spawner. So let's go ahead and lower our render a bunch, refresh with Shift F3, and then boom, we are here. From here, now that the spawner is now unloaded, we raise our render 1 by 1 slowly to see when that cyan value, the mob spawner, shows up in the pie graph. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay. So at render distance 9, as you can see in the chat, it shows you the render as you go to when raising it with F3F. At 9 render, the mob spawner has shown up in our pie graph. Now that we know that this is the case, we lower by 4, 2, 3, 4, and then we refresh the pie with Shift F3 to unload the spawner. There you go. Now, since we know that we're 4 chunks less of where the spawner is, we raise our render by 3, 2, 3. Now we're at 8 render, which is 1 render less of where the spawner is. From here, we turn on our chunk borders, and let's go ahead and check these adjacent chunks. It's not north, let's check east. It's not east, let's check south. It's not south, so let's check west. Boom, the mob spawner has showed up again, which means that the spawner is in the west direction. So let's go ahead and raise our render. Turn on your spectator mode, because you can clearly do that in a normal game. Boom, 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 run, run, run. Fly, fly, fly. And, oh, would you look at this? The spawner, or the fortress, is actually over here. Now, as you can see, these can actually scan a little bit diagonally. Even though we were around there, it was technically scanning in this direction, but it was a little bit diagonal. This can happen with fortresses. And so that's why it is very useful to employ the macro for Jingle, which is the wide view macro, because you will generally run in a direction and then you will set your screen to be wide. I'll have it active right now because I don't have the program open, but as you run in a particular direction and use the jingle widescreen macro, you can actually rule out a lot of the different fortresses that can be a little bit diagonal along the way. In the previous video, I spoke about how having blocks as well as a boat can help you in the Nether, but it's time to talk about the most useful mobility option in the game, which is the Ender Pearl. Ender Pearls, when tossed, have extremely useful reach, and when paired with fire resistance potions and blocks, you can travel large distances in the Nether pretty much for free. The only drawback is that pearls are limited, and they deal damage to the player, meaning the more food you have, the more you can pearl. This is, in my opinion, debatably the most important reason you want to have food in your speedrun, as it allows you to pearl as much as you can in the Nether. Even though you need 12 pearls from the Bastion minimum to complete the run in general, this is why having excess pearls, even a couple stacks of them at times, can be massively beneficial for your run. After finishing your Bastion, scan for the fortress, pick its direction, and start chucking pearls across the vast terrain. It's also important to mention that pearls have a mechanic that scales your throw distance based on the motion of the player. So if you perform a sprint jump in a direction, you will toss your pearl further and higher, making each throw as efficient as possible. Finally, we are here, the Nether Fortress. It is here that the second part of the Nether split will be played, and your ability to fight against mobs will be tested. The Nether Fortress split is actually quite simple compared to other parts of the speedrun. Your main goal in this part of the run is to kill as many blazes as possible. Blazes are a unique mob that float slightly over the ground, and they charge up 3 fire shots over time to shoot in a sort of 3-round burst. These shots won't do any damage if you're under the effect of fire resistance, which is why those potions come in very clutch. Blazes also do pretty insane melee damage, so it's important to distance yourself from them as you fight them. When killed, blazes have a 50% chance to drop a blaze rod, and we need 6 to 7 of them, so until you gather those 6 rods at least, you'll be hunting blazes. Within the fortress, you will also encounter wither skeletons, which naturally spawn as well, and are a bit more scary, as if you take damage from them, you'll get a withering debuff that blackens your HP bar and makes you take periodic damage. These withers must be dealt with at all costs if you are to proceed in the fortress. After you're done the fortress split, the idea is to eventually use these blaze rods to craft blaze powder, to then craft Eyes of Ender with your remaining Ender Pearls. You get 2 powder per rod, so 6 rods allow us to get 12 Eyes of Ender, which is the maximum amount you need to enter the end to finish the speedrun. So let's talk about how to find blazes in the fortress. Blazes aren't inherently hard mobs to fight. They die to 1 crit and 1 full hit from a stone axe or better, and they are basically free to kill if you have enough fire resistance. The main problem, however, is finding them and ensuring enough of them spawn for you to get your 6 blaze rods in a reasonable time, which is a percentage drop anyways. So the primary goal of speedrunners in the fortress is to simply find as many blazes as possible in the shortest amount of time possible. To do this, ideally, you want to find the blaze spawner itself and station yourself around it to essentially farm them for a period of time. Let's talk about how to route through a Nether Fortress and what to prioritize in different cases. If you're entering into a Nether Fortress and see a spawner right away, this is where you want to go first. You're at the spawner, and that's good. If you enter into a fortress and don't see a spawner right away, however, there are a couple things to consider. The Nether Fortress is actually a structure that has 2 parts to it. One part is what I would call the spawner half, comprised of these bridges that don't have a roof, where blaze spawners can generate. The other half is the enclosed part, made up of hallways and staircases that seem to go in all kinds of directions, which I personally call the loot part of the fortress, since there are rarely chests in here. If you ever find yourself within this enclosed loot half of the fortress, there is a surefire method to always route towards the spawner half, and that involves understanding the different kinds of rooms you will encounter inside of the fortress. Listen to these key rules of fortress navigation. First of all, if you ever see an upward staircase like this, always go up. The spawner half always spawns on top of all of these staircases in the fortress. However, if you ever encounter this nether wart staircase, always go down and through the room in front of it. This is another rule of fortress generation. If you are walking through hallways and encounter what seems to be a fortress balcony like this, the rule here is that you must walk perpendicular to it, or in the opposite direction. Essentially, just find the balcony and walk towards the opposite way. Combine all of these rules and at some point you will make your way to this room which has a small lava well in the middle. This room is known as the middle room, and it always generates as the connecting point between the spawner half and the looting half of the fortress. Once you're here, you are guaranteed to have found the spawner half. From here, follow through the nether bridges to eventually find your spawner. Alright everybody, so I am currently in the Nether Fortress, and I am currently in a loot half of the fortress as denoted by me being in these hallways with a roof. So basically, we're going to take into account the rules that I just spoke about and try to navigate our way through this thing. So first, let's just run through the hall, sprint jump for max speed, run, and look at this. So we encountered first this nether wart staircase room, and as per the rules that we spoke of, the idea is to go down the staircase and through the front of it, basically, to where it leads downwards. So if you approach it from behind or above it, you just go down and then forward. Bye-bye. So let's keep going. As you can see, now we have encountered this balcony. The rule for the balcony suggests that we need to move perpendicular of it in this way. As you can see, right in front of it are a couple normal staircases that lead upwards. So as you can see, it's kind of like lined up. This rule is bringing us to the other rule of staircases going up. So with these staircases, we just go simply upwards. And wow, would you look at that? The lava well room is right here. This is the middle point of the fortress, and now we can go towards the spawner half. And as you can see, our spawners are right there. Let's go ahead and toss a pretty aggressive pearl to get there in pretty quick time. Block clutch on the wall. Oh, almost fall to my death. Perfect. And as you can see, you can make your way to this spawner pretty effectively like this. Alright everybody, so for the sake of example, we're going to go ahead and do the same idea in a totally different fortress. So, like again, we're just running in a random direction, boom. Already encountered the normal staircase, so let's just go up. Now, from here, where the directions aren't really too clear, you want to just go around and check all adjacent rooms as fast as much as you possibly can to kind of find another rule that you can go by. As you can see right here, we luckily spotted this nether wart staircase, so we know that we need to go along it, down or in front, and keep going. And you can see we reached another nether wart staircase. Same idea, we go down and forward. Another normal staircase, we go up it, and boom, right, just like that, we are already at the lava well room, and from here, we go around and try to find the blaze spawner. Now, there actually is another pretty handy technique that you can use to find spawners in a fortress that is very buried like this. One thing that we can do is actually bring out our buried treasure pie graph, set our render to 8 and entity distance low, and then refresh in all little directions. As you can see, this block entity's value will spike up for spawners. That's another thing that this can actually be used for, because buried treasure chests are block entities, but spawners themselves are block entities as well. As you can see, I see a spike in 2 of these directions. Let's go ahead and pick this direction. And wow, the spawner is right here. Just for the sake of example, we can also go into the other direction there, which I scanned, and there was a spawner here as well. So that little bit of buried treasure knowledge can actually help you in cases where the fortress is enclosed like this and navigation isn't very intuitive. Finally, we're at a blaze spawner. Like I said before, blazes are pretty easy mobs to deal with on their own. The biggest problem are the withers that get in the way, as well as potentially skeletons that spawn here as well. Clear any of them and make your way to the spawner itself. And let's take a look at it. All mob spawners in Minecraft share the same mechanics, and the way that they spawn mobs is actually in periodic waves. Every 10 to 15 seconds, a spawner will start spinning the mob inside faster and eventually performs a check to see where mobs can spawn around it, and then spawns a wave of mobs based on how many open spaces are near it, which is why the first thing any speedrunner should do is open up the spawner by mining away all surrounding side blocks, as well as one block underneath. This will open up additional spaces for more blazes to spawn. For blaze spawners, the maximum amount of blazes that will spawn per wave is 4, meaning that if you get waves of 1 to 3 blazes spawning at a time, either your spawner isn't fully mined out properly or you're just getting unlucky. Over time, speedrunners have realized that there are faster methods for mining out the blaze spawner instead of with your pickaxe, and here's where things get explosive. One method for blowing up a spawner involves the usage of a bed, and this technique is known as blaze bedding. In the Nether, or the End, if you use a bed, you will actually not normally go to sleep. This instead will cause a massive explosion to take place, and if you position this explosion right on top of the spawner, it will clear a lot of blocks for you. Set up a bed on top of the spawner, hide, and let it rip. This will open up a space around the spawner immediately, but also will spread fire around the spawner. I mentioned before that mobs need space around a spawner to spawn, but light levels actually affect mob spawns as well, meaning you will need to punch out all of these flames in addition to clearing up blocks to make sure your blazes can spawn efficiently. You can also do this with TNT, blocking the spawner with hard blocks like nether brick or black stone that can resist the explosion and set them off. This is clearly an advantage that Desert Temple seeds have. I'll demonstrate now a few methods of spawner clearing. What's up everybody, so I'm currently in a Nether Fortress and I'm at a blaze spawner. So let's talk about a couple of different ways that we can use beds and as well as TNT to explode spawners and open them up for the purposes of farming more blazes. So the first thing you want to do is obviously, craft your bed. And this can be done at any point in the game when you really have the strength to do so. A good common strategy that people like to use is crafting the bed as you're waiting for the rest of your trades to finish up in the bastion, and I'll talk a little bit about task overlap there at the end of this video in the tips and tricks final segment. So let's go ahead and clear the blazes that spawned on the spawner first. Go ahead and kill them and take a look here. So in order to prevent the spawner itself from being blown up by the explosion of the bed, it's necessary to first use a hard block like nether brick or blackstone. For sure cobblestone works for that as well. So basically you want a block with high blast resistance and place that on top of the spawner. Now take a look here. I mentioned before that beds cause an explosion to happen whenever you try to right click it in the nether, but the thing is that if you place this bed, the explosion actually happens on the pillow block of the bed, not on the base. You can right click it from anywhere to cause it to explode, but the explosion originates from the pillow. That's the key thing to note, and that's actually going to end up being very, very important later on in the game. Also, it's crazy how I already got enough rods. But basically, the explosion will originate at the pillow. And to explode the spawner, you want to mine 2 blocks above, if it's enclosed like this, and place the bed like this, such that the pillow block is on top of the spawner directly. Mine 1 block down to ensure that you are blocked away from the pillow as well when you explode it. So you're blocked from the pillow, the spawner is blocked from the pillow, and then you right click it. Boom. Of course, sometimes lava will spill from above if you do something like that. But if I do this and then just wait for it to finish. Alright, so everybody, now I will show you a slightly alternative method for blowing up a blaze bed that involves a slightly different setup, but is a little bit faster to set up in most cases. So if you have your bed handy and pre-crafted entering into the spawner, what you can do is immediately run to the spawner, place 1 block on top of it as normal, and another block that doesn't have gravity on either the top left little fence thing here or the top right little fence thing here. Either way works. You go ahead and place 1, 2. From here, you actually have a kind of streamlined way to place the bed like this. And in order to block yourself from the explosion, you run into the corner of the side that you placed those 2 little blocks on, being blocked from the bed. All you do is jump now and right-click the bed. See? Pretty decent motion here. Of course we got more lava because of the basalt delta being here, which is a little bit annoying. Can't always be guaranteed that you're not going to be screwed over by some type of terrain generation. But, let it spill. Let it drain. And this one should be good. For another sake of example, I'm going to be doing this again, and I'm just going to be doing it pretty quickly, so you'll see how it's supposed to look like when you are doing it pretty fast without my dialogue. So quickly craft your bed, run over to the spawner, clear the blaze first, and then look. Whoops. Don't worry about that last little block there. And as you can see, you want to really quickly get rid of the fire as much as possible. Flames that are further away impact the light level around the spawner a little bit less, so they can be kind of not prioritized as much as flames that are closer to the spawner, I would say. And look, the spawner is already very much open. Now, at this point, when your spawner is essentially completely open like this, the idea is to extend the platform a little bit so that blazes that you've hit with your axe won't really, you know, fly off the side and prevent you from getting your rod. Like, for example, if I wanted to, like, kill this blaze here, it's like, oh wow, look how it flew away, you know? That's a problem, but that's why soul sand is a very handy block to have. In this case, when your spawner is fully open, take your soul sand and start extending the platform around very slightly. This not only adds a little bit of extra room for blazes to spawn, but since soul sand has the mechanic of slowing down any mob that walks over it, the blazes that you will try to find and hit with your axe will not have that much knockback whenever you hit them onto, like, the soul sand. So if I hit this guy, see how he kind of got stuck on the soul sand block there? See, the soul sand has the effect of actually slowing down those blazes so they won't fly away from your platform. And it's just crazy. I already have 15 blaze rods doing this. It's so effective. Alright, so now let's talk a little bit about TNT for blaze spawners. Now, TNT, in my opinion, I like over using beds usually, because you don't have any fire to deal with once you use TNT. So let's take a look at this. So we mentioned before that the explosion for beds originated at the pillow. Well, the TNT block is literally itself the explosion, and there are a couple different ways for setting them up. When you have two TNTs, what I like to do is you make two little, two high blocks of netherrack or nether brick or some other block with blast resistance. Put any block on the two sides of it like that, and then place your two TNTs above them. This will create a sort of diagonal covering for the explosion, and since the TNT is slightly above the ground, it has a better little bit of reach to hit all blocks that are either above it or on the sides like these fences. If you go ahead and light both of the TNTs like this, the spawner should live, and everything is basically cleared out instantly with no fire around it. There is also another method for using TNT if you have more than 2 TNT. You could actually do a setup with 3 TNT or even 4 TNT, and I will quickly show you this 4 TNT setup, which is known as the donut strategy. So if you take your spawner like this and you cover it entirely with your hard block, in this case I'm using nether brick, kill this guy for being annoying, and take your 4 TNTs and place them all along the sides like this. Light them all, clear out, and just look at how much this is clear. It's beautiful. It is so beautiful. It is instantly cleared out, and then you take your soul sand and you quickly build your platform. You kind of do it like this, with reaching and spamming your right click basically to build in lines. A little bit of a building skill here involved in making this little soul sand platform, but it's good. So you see, as long as your platform is max 2 blocks out in all directions, that's the largest you usually want to make. You never want to make it bigger than this, mostly because you don't have to. And you just go ahead and form your blazes like this. Even if I sprint hit this blaze, you get stopped at the soul sand, you see. That's why making this little platform out of soul sand is very beneficial. And you should always grab at least 1 stack of soul sand from your bastion trades from the pigments. Bring that with you to the fortress for the sole purpose, see what I did there? Sole purpose. The sole purpose of building this platform for the blazes. And there we have it, most if not all required knowledge surrounding fighting blazes. In the classical tips and tricks final segment, we'll also cover a couple more tips for fortresses, so stay tuned for that. Now that we've gathered our blaze rods and have all of our materials handy, The next step in the speedrun after the fortress is finding the Stronghold, which in Minecraft is where we find the end portal room, allowing us to fight the Ender Dragon and finish the game. Let's talk about something called eye calculation, the premium method for finding the Stronghold, which we'll talk about in the next and last tutorial episode. It's time to set up the most technical strategy of the speedrun. Strongholds in Minecraft have a more unique way of spawning than any other structure in the game. They spawn in something known as Stronghold rings, which are bands across the entire world's generation, and the first ring that Strongholds can spawn in is around 1,000 to 2,000 blocks in the overworld. You can see here a diagram depicting all of these Stronghold rings, and you can actually see that Strongholds spawn in a sort of equal geometric pattern. The problem is that these strongholds are very far, and just running your way there would not be optimal, so we have to find a way to travel this distance that is very efficient. The Nether has some interesting mechanics when compared to the overworld that I kinda left out up until this point. For each block you travel in the Nether, it actually equates to 8 blocks traveled in the overworld. This means that if you're in the Nether and multiply both your X and Z coordinates by 8, that would be your current overworld coordinates if you were, for example, to make a portal and exit from it there. In the distant past, speedrunners would try to use this information and pick a pretty decent location in the Nether with coordinates that when multiplied by 8 would make the runner land somewhere within the first Stronghold ring. This technique is known as blind travel, which involves using 10 obsidian to make a portal that lands the speedrunner already quite far and within the first Stronghold ring, potentially making the runner close to the Stronghold. This technique obviously is incredibly random. You can either hit the blind or not hit the blind. At some point down Minecraft speedrunning's lifespan, a calculator was introduced to cure this fatigue of runners blinding and constantly missing the Stronghold. This program is known as NinjaBot, and I will have a link in the description for you to install it at this point. Using this calculator, speedrunners are actually capable to throw eyes and measure the super specific angle, which will be pumped into the program and will give you percentage values of potential possible locations for the Stronghold. The Eye of Ender, when thrown, always points towards something known as the starter staircase of the Stronghold. With this method, the Stronghold is actually incredibly easy to find, as long as you're accurate with measuring. There is now no longer a need for just one portal in your speedrun. The strategy has now evolved into this. First, you create one portal with 10 obsidian anywhere in the Nether after you have blaze rods. Calculate the location of the Stronghold and take note of the specific coordinates where the starter staircase lies. Travel back through the Nether, which is very efficient, towards your measured location, and create your second portal right on that block with the rest of your obsidian. Enter, and boom. This technique is known as calculated travel or double portal travel, and is why we need 20 obsidian from the bastion. Either way, this is the standard practice for finding the Stronghold in Minecraft. So let's talk about setting up the calculator. Alright everybody, so now that we finally installed NinjaBot and we're on a totally random seed, I went into creative and went out pretty far in the overworld. I gave myself all of the necessary materials to start calculating, so let's finally take a good look at the NinjaBot and all of the settings so we can get familiarized with the software. Alright, so basically with NinjaBot, you can open it up. I'm currently on version 1.5.1, which is a slightly outdated version, but more or less a lot of the functionalities should be the same. So go ahead and click on the gear icon and let's take a look at some of these settings. I'm going to briefly skim over a lot of them, as a lot of them are pretty basic, but there are a couple that really matter. So first of all, I like to show nether coordinates. This means that whenever you measure an eye, the coordinate you get is not only the overworld coordinate, but also the nether one, which is very important because you need to go to the nether in order to find the stronghold second portal location. Auto reset when idle for 15, that's good because it just over time clears itself. Always on top is a good setting as well, so it's basically kind of pinned on your screen. You obviously need it to be pinned on your screen while you're using it in a game. So display stronghold chunk essentially just shows you the general location of the starter staircase. I know some people like to use chunk coordinates, but I like using the exact coordinates of 4-4. You could use any of these, but it should more or less land you in the same area. I do like having detailed view, and I set my window size to small typically, but I'm using my, medium for the purposes of this video. The Minecraft version here, 1.9 to 1.18, is the one that you want to select, because this uses the logic for finding strongholds in 1.16.1, the current version that we are speedrunning on. So in terms of advanced settings, this is the one that matters the most, this one known as standard deviation. Basically, whenever you throw an eye in Minecraft to calculate it, you always have a little bit of a margin of error. The measuring of the eye is a pretty particular process that requires you to be extremely accurate. What standard deviation is more or less a value that the game tries to use to determine how many possible strongholds you're trying to measure. Basically, a higher standard deviation means that the calculator considers more possible strongholds for you to be looking at, and thus gives you more percentage chances of different possibilities. A smaller standard deviation, however, assumes that you are measuring a little bit more accurately, and a smaller deviation value means that there are less possibilities of strongholds that you're looking at, giving you a much more finer calculation. A smaller standard deviation here, then, gives you a much higher chance of finding the stronghold, without much variance. This standard deviation doesn't matter. We don't really need to worry about these. I do like showing angle errors. It shows you a bit of, basically it gives you a little bit of a tooltip, letting you know that your measurement was a little bit off, and I will talk a little bit about that later. Displaying negative coordinates in a different color essentially shows positive coordinates as one shade of green and negative coordinates in a different one, just giving you a little bit of visual fidelity when you're trying to reference those coordinates at the same time while running to it in the nether. Using advanced stronghold statistics is also pretty good. It just ensures that you have updated information. Save state between sessions, and you don't really need that. The theme is cool. You can change to be any theme that you want. I currently use the Bastion theme because it's kind of like pretty much like a dark theme. Oh, blue is pretty good too. Oh yeah, there is a dark theme, whatever. Hotkeys is pretty important, so essentially from top to bottom, changing your last angle by plus or minus 0.01. Essentially, whenever you calculate the eye, you can kind of tell sometimes based on the lineup of your crosshair, and I'll show you a demonstration of that a little bit after. But basically, sometimes when you're measuring, your crosshair could be ever so slightly to the side. So whenever you press up or down on your arrow key, this kind of edits the angle that you measured, allowing you to kind of precisely change it as you go. This is actually going to be a pretty important thing to do for something known as boat eye measurement, which is a much more advanced way to measure eyes, but that will be talked about in the next tutorial episode as one of the final additions to the speedrun. Resetting the calculator is also pretty important to do. Obviously, between sessions, you'll be needing to reset it to baseline to not have any previous measurements displayed on it, so do this between runs. Undo is obviously what it sounds like to redo pretty bad eye measurements and to throw again. And redo is obviously there. I don't even have that in use. I don't even need that. Toggle window visibility is pretty good too. So essentially I have it set so whenever I press X, this goes on and off my screen. I don't always need it on my screen, so being able to toggle the window visibility is pretty important for the run. OBS overlay is as it is described here. You get a little bit of a image that you can put on your stream if you're trying to stream Minecraft speedruns. This is where you want to add a image source in your OBS, and there is a little bit of logic here for showing it on your stream and disabling it on your stream whenever you use it. So basically, whenever you use the calculator, it will show up on your stream overlay, and whenever it's not used for about 30 seconds, I have set here 30-second delay, it will hide on your stream. Language is what it is. And optional features, now for general, I like to show the direction to the stronghold. This is good. This will ensure that the calculator shows you the angle that you should be traveling towards to get to the stronghold. Obviously, seeing the coordinates is one thing, but seeing the angle of where you have to run is much more important information. Show a warning if the calculator detects you mismeasured. Yes, that is good. Show a warning if you cannot nether travel because of portal linking. This is also good. This is actually an interesting mechanic of portals. Whenever you make a portal in the overworld, if you make a portal in the nether that is within 400 or 200, I think, 200 to 300 block in the overworld, like in the nether, so that would be like around 30 blocks-ish in the nether away. And if you make a portal in the nether 30 blocks away from another nether portal, the portals actually link to the same one in the overworld. So this could be a problem for strongholds that are extremely close that could potentially get in the way of the double portal strategy. In these cases where you cannot travel to the nether because of portal linking, you'll have to just travel to the stronghold right away out of your first portal, toss pearls in the overworld because it's only going to be 200 to 300 blocks away or under, and that should be the way that you should play those situations. These last two informational messages are also pretty important because they dictate whether or not you should do slight adjustments to your strategy for finding the stronghold. The last one in particular is pretty important. And angle adjustment, you just set this to number of adjustments. Tall resolution is fine. Don't worry about boat measurement. This is for the final tutorial episode. Alright, with all of these things set up, you can now just click X and these should be saved to your software. So let's finally talk about actually calculating an eye. So, in order to calculate an eye, you obviously have to have your Eye of Ender, and as you travel throughout Minecraft in your speedrun, the position of the player sometimes gets a little bit desynced with the code of the game. I know it's hard to kind of understand, but every time you want to throw an eye and calculate it in Minecraft, you have to try and resync your position in the world. And the way you do this is actually two ways you do this. One is you get into the corner of a block like this. See? This ensures that your movement is more or less resynced. Another way is to get into a boat and get out of it. This also resyncs your position. The boat actually resyncs you better than the corner block. So if you want to get into a boat and get out, you're already in a position, and stay still and don't move, and then you can throw your eye. Whenever you throw an eye, you also have to be pretty fast about it. As you throw it, it's going to go in a totally random direction, and you're going to immediately have to try and look at it pretty quickly. It's important to practice this. It is actually very important to practice this. It took me quite a bit of time to get used to throwing eyes for the first time. So let's go ahead, throw an eye, and see what we do. So immediately I saw that the eye went this direction. I looked at it and I paused. Here is where you do a couple settings changes. First, you want to lower your FOV to its lowest point, so you can really see the Eye of Ender much more closely in the sky. Go into your mouse settings and change your sensitivity to its lowest point, which is yawn. And also turn your raw input off just to make sure that your mouse is extremely slow. The reason why you want your mouse to be slow is because it's much more easier to very finely, precisely line it up with the Eye of Ender. Immediately after doing this, I want you to look at the eye and hold F3 and press escape. See? This is actually how you pause your game without going into the pause menu. And as you can see, we are in a pretty decent spot here. So take a look. I'm going to zoom in the video here, and I'm going to tell you what we're trying to achieve. The Eye of Ender has a couple little pixels in the iris. These 3 pixels that denote the 3 wide iris art. What we want to do is line up our crosshair, the right side of our middle crosshair kind of stick, and we're going to lay it against on the left side of the middle iris pixel. In other words, our middle crosshair stick will perfectly cover this left iris pixel and essentially replace it. And the accuracy of this is judged by how perfectly the right side of our middle crosshair stick is on the left side of the iris. If it's pixel perfect, then that is a perfect calculation. So in order to line this up, we want to hold F3 and spam escape a couple times while moving our mouse so we can achieve the perfect kind of lineup. Look here right now. I'm pretty satisfied with this. I'm more or less lined up with the middle iris pixel. So immediately after I press escape and get out of this pause menu, I'm going to press F3 plus C, which is a built-in Minecraft F3 function, like enabling hitboxes with F3B, F3G to show chunk borders. F3C copies your coordinates, but it doesn't really matter for us to copy it. What this does is it sends this information into Ninja Brain Bot. The fact that we copy our coordinates and angle using F3 plus C is a macro for the calculator to instantly take what is on your clipboard and utilize that as information. So let's go ahead and do that. F3C. Boom. As you can see, we now have a couple different possibilities of where the stronghold may be. I have two offsets there, one for 47.4% and one for 31.4%. Before you want to start measuring your eye, the first thing we obviously have to do is try and calibrate our standard deviation. Of course, I have mine set to something extremely low because I am working with boat eye calculation. So if I wanted to calibrate my standard deviation, I would have to measure my eyes in a sort of mini game that the game wants me to do. So make sure your open command key in Minecraft is set to K, make a creative world, and then press F3 plus C. So we're going to go into our controls and we're going to say open command is K. Done with that. Alright, so if we start doing our little mini game here and do some eye calculations. Alright, so we want to calculate this. Boom. Set our stuff back. Like that. So basically you just keep measuring and it gives you these slight changes to it. Every time you look at the eye, you set your crosshair to the left of the middle iris. And so over time, you can see that my standard deviation is getting to be around 0.117. So as long as you do around all of these, you click done, and this will update your standard deviation. Of course, if you want that to get lower and lower, you just keep measuring eyes, you keep trying to calibrate it, and once you are confident that you're measuring very, very well, then you can, maybe even set this to be a little bit lower. Like I'm gonna set mine to maybe like 0.0100. So let's put all of this into action, shall we? I'll also put a link in the description for you to install something known as a mini practice kit, which allows you to save loadouts and run a script to choose any split of the game to practice in and of itself. As you can see, I have a script here that allows me to get into a position on a totally random seed and be in a position to calculate my eye. Of course, I spawned a little bit underground, so I'm just going back up. And so, let's try and calculate the stronghold together. Right here, out of spectator mode, and I'm on the corner of a block like this, and let's go ahead and do it. I do not like how I had hitboxes on there, but you just quickly get rid of it. Boom. So we have one calculation here. And one important thing that you need to look at is the error on the right side here. If you ever have eye tosses that have a high error associated with it, that is going to make it pretty inaccurate. it means that the eye is really out there. So these are the moments where you'd want to undo the eye toss and get rid of eye tosses that have high error. Of course, this one is 0.02, 0.002, which is a pretty good eye calculation. So it wants me to go left 8 blocks or right 57, that's crazy. So we go left 8 blocks, do a little bit of a diagonal speed bridge, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, around here. At the corner of this block, make a little corner indent, and again, another eye toss. And like that. As you can see, it is now pointing me in a 90% accuracy towards this stronghold. Now, one thing that I can do is I can take a look at the calculations that I made earlier, and I can actually edit the angle by pressing up. It's just something that you can do to lower the error of your eyes. And as you can see, it's still pointing me towards that stronghold, but as this angle gets totally lopsided, it points me to a different one. So with reasonable accuracy, I can determine that this is the stronghold that we should go to. So if that's the case, let's go ahead and make our portal. Let's go back through the Nether. And okay, so basically, whenever you're in the Nether... this guy hitting me. So basically, whenever you're in the Nether and you want to find the direction and how far you need to get towards to get to those Nether coordinates, you can actually press F3C. And this will update your calculator to show the distance of the stronghold that you need to get towards. It's the distance towards your Nether coordinates that you need to make your portal at, as well as the angle that you need to go towards. So, assuming that we need to go to -64, I can look at this direction, get myself a fire res. Since it's pretty far, I could just start purling blind like that to get towards that second portal location. Of course, I landed a little bit in lava, so update again with F3C. You see we're 139 blocks away this time. Gas is shooting at me, that's great. I'll line up the -61 angle and purl towards this terrain, which is what you should do in this case. Always want to make your way as efficiently as possible through the Nether in all circumstances. Just have to go up here a little bit. Let's go, go, go. There is low terrain here, which is very good, and I'll tell you why. Whenever you make your second portal in the Nether to get towards the Stronghold, it's very helpful to be at a lower Y value, since the Stronghold is underground and does take into account the Y value of the portal you make. It's also important to look at your coordinates and see how the Nether wants you to be at 314, -56. Over here, if you look at your block coordinates, this is the true block that you're standing on. X, Y, and Z are a good visual indicator of what your coordinates are, but if you look at the block coordinates, 310, -50, this is the block that you're truly standing on and should be the portal block that you're standing on when you're in the portal. So, if that's the case, let's go over to -56 and 314, which is precisely this block here. So, let's just make our portal here. So, now that you're in the portal and you're standing on 314, -56, let's go ahead. Boom. And this is, by principle, how you find the Stronghold in Minecraft. Just as an additional example, I'm going to do another eye calculation, but this time without all of the yapping. So let's go. Here. Corner. Reset the calculator. There. C. Alright, so we have to go right 15 blocks, which is sometimes unfortunate. I'm also getting a phone call. That's funny. Alright, so we have to go right 15, so we'll kind of have to eyeball this. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, Well, like a little bit of Pythagoras theorem, you know, for those of you studying math, you know, it's from a math class. This is very complicated mathematics. Boom, and as you can see, our eye is telling us that it's that way. If we change our angle around, we can see that it really is favoring the 1658 distance one and negative 2380, so we're going to take this one. Go back and pick up your eyes if they didn't break. Remember, 25% chance if they break. You can actually splash fire resistance on yourself as you're in the portal. So, angle 27. It would actually be embarrassing if I died in a tutorial, huh? So I'll show you how to do this in the tips and tricks final segment, but if you mine through the wall and make too small like this, and you're in your boat, you hold shift, and then while you're holding shift, or actually you hold sprint, and then you crouch while you're holding sprint in the boat, and then you get out of it with crouch, hit the floor, and then hit the boat to take your boat back. If I'm smart, I can take that. Actually, I lost it, whatever. This is known as boat crawl, and it's a advanced strategy to just get through a wall. It's much faster than mining too high for the player. So if you're crawling like this, you can make a lot of distance. So now we need to go angle 32. And with soul speed boots, you can soul speed bridge through this. And update with F3C to see the exact way that you should be going. Can actually probably pearl over to that terrain there. It's always good to find the best possible terrain to get towards your portal location. I'm at 122, I'll build out like this. Another thing you can do is actually just pearl into the lava over there. Like, I can tell that I need to go this direction, so I'll just pearl like maybe 30-ish blocks that way. Build up out of it. Later, dude. So we're at negative 288, 122. We're at 37 wide. You really want to be like 40 to 45 wide typically, like the portal. And there you have it. And there we have it, the finishing tutorial for the Nether with all information on fortresses, as well as setting us up for the finale by learning how to calculate eyes. I just wanted to say that in your ranked matches, fortresses will always exist in the game, and in ranked it's all about which player can find it quicker. This split is pretty tedious, and being fast with fortress scanning is an incredible benefit. Eye calculation also takes a bit of time to practice. It's all about throwing the eye and quickly being able to line up your crosshair with the left of the middle pupil pixel. Fix that one in post-editing for sure. Definitely take some time to repetitively calculate eyes, as the more accurate you get with eye calculation, and the faster you can do it, will very clearly save you time in both normal speedruns and ranked matches. As always, it is now time for the ultimate tips and tricks final segment, where I will showcase advanced strategies to improve your split times. Let's get right into it. What's up everybody? Welcome to the tips and tricks final segment. And we're going to start off right off the bat by showing you how to scan for fortresses quicker than the method I showed you earlier in this video. So if we wanted to open up our pie graph and make our way over to the fortress scanning menu, we go tick, level, entities, block entities, and take a look here. We already see a spawner. If you don't see a spawner, raise your render until you do see it. And if you don't see one in RSG up until like 20 to 25 chunks, just reset your seed anyways. But let's go ahead and lower our render all the way down to 2 by holding Shift F3F, refresh it, unload the spawner, turn on our chunk borders, and then just raise one by one until we see it. There we go. 8 is the render of the spawner. And let's lower by 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Refresh. It's gone. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we're at 7 render, which is 1 less than 8. And then take a look here. So we are used to the method where we slowly check each and every chunk around us. You know, it wasn't north, you know, it's not west. If I run all the way over here, it's not south, like, ooh. You know, so the last direction is east, which it is. The spawner just showed up east. But go back here, 3. Let's talk about a slightly different way of doing this all faster. The reality is that you don't really need to check all 4 directions. In reality, you only need to check 2 directions to be able to scan for the fortress quicker. See here. Since we lowered our render by 4 and raised it by 3, and in this chunk we are 1 chunk away from the fortress being, or from the spawner showing up on our pie graph, which is why, you know, if we check all these directions, it would show up if we just checked 1 direction. But if we were, for example, to go into a direction here, and the spawner didn't show up, we are in a situation where if the spawner is in the opposite direction, then we are 2 chunks away from it. See what I mean? If you go into a side chunk of this scanning area and raise your render by 1, and the spawner didn't show up in your pie, you can just walk back into the original chunk that you began in, and then see the spawner showed up. So I more or less went here, raised my render by 1, and checked the opposite direction immediately like this. This already showed me that the spawner is in that way. But you know, that's a little bit lucky because that's the opposite case. What if it was like north or south? So here's what you do in this case. If you want to take this a step further and be even more efficient with scanning for the fortress, let's first check the west direction. We know it's not the west direction, so it has to be north, east, or south. So we already know that it's not west. So run into a corner chunk now. In this case, we're going to run north. As you can see, it's not north, nor is it west. So it has to be east or south, one of these 2 opposite diagonal directions. Since I am in this diagonal chunk, and I didn't see the spawner show up, if I raise my render by 1 here, the spawner will show up in either the south direction or the east direction from here. From here, we can check all 4 directions by just walking into a corner chunk and verifying whether or not the spawner was in this direction. So let's walk back to south. It didn't show up. Let's walk back to east, and it showed up. See? Let's do this again, just a little bit quicker. So we know that the spawner is east. Run west, it's not here. Run north, it's not here. Raise by 1. Check south, it's not here. East, it's here. See how manipulating your render distance and doing this kind of fortress scan in the outer opposite chunks can actually make this process a lot quicker. And I actually do this a lot while I am trading in the Bastion. Alright, so in terms of making our way over to a fortress, I obviously mentioned that pearls were an extremely beneficial way to navigate the terrain. However, there are a few things that you can do with pearls that are a little bit advanced in their movement mechanics. If I were to simply throw a pearl, obviously if you land on the floor, it will pretty much clearly make you land on the floor. You take 2.5 hearts of damage, and then run your way over there. I can see the fortress is there. And take a look here. I'm going to pearl like this, and then see what I do here. I'll actually raise my mouse sensitivity a slight bit so I can have better fidelity of doing this. If you saw the fortress like this and wanted to pearl towards it, it's a little bit hard to land on the kind of flat surfaces above. So you want to do something known as a pearl block clutch. Block clutching, if you're familiar with it, you basically save yourself on the side of a wall by placing a block under you like this so you don't fall and take fall damage. But with pearling, you're usually going to land on the wall of the fortress. And in that case, whenever you throw a pearl and land on a wall, you want to basically throw the pearl, then quickly look down based on the direction that you're moving or facing towards. Hold crouch and backwards, and then spam right click when you are basically positioning yourself such that you will place this block under you. This is known as a block clutch, but when you pearl, it's pretty much called a pearl clutch. So I pearl, then see, I place the block here on the side so that I don't fall and take fall damage. It's very important to be used to doing this, as it is a nice bit of movement skill that preserves your HP and makes you travel around the Nether much faster, and this will also be very important to deploy when you are doing Zero Cycle, which is the final strategy that I will pretty much talk about in the final tutorial episode. So, on the topic of pearls and how useful they are for traversing in the Nether, there is actually quite an unprecedented technique that you can do known as a pearl hang. Render distance is an interesting thing in the game, that whenever things are not within your render distance, like since my render is 16, things that are outside of the 16 chunks will no longer be loaded in. If you threw a pearl, and I'll turn on my hitbox for this, if you threw a pearl and threw it quite some distance, paused your game, and lowered your render distance to something extremely low like 2, wait a couple seconds, you see, the pearl actually isn't loaded anymore. And you can tell by your chunk borders, definitely the pearl is over 2 chunks away from you right now through this fog. So the pearl that you threw is essentially in a state of, well, I would say kind of like stasis. It's like frozen. This allows you to actually do whatever you want, either finishing your trades in the bastion, you pearl hang, you throw your way towards the fortress, finish your trades in the bastion, finish killing a couple last blazes to get the rest of your rods, while you throw your pearl towards second portal coordinates in the Nether to build your second portal to get to the Stronghold. This pearl hang method is actually very omni-use. And all you need to do to reload the pearl is to simply, after you're done everything you want it to do, you simply load up your render, back up, and then get ready as the pearl is now alive again. And we'll send you through. Oh, and I'm going to burn to death. See, that's why you want to use fire resistance. Alright, what's up everybody? So I'm currently within Treasure Bastion, and as you may have probably guessed up until this point, the fact that there is a magma cube spawner in Treasure is a big problem that will prevent us from scanning the direction of the fortress. Obviously, if you see the fortress leading up to going inside of Treasure Bastion, it is a great benefit. And in RSG or Ranked, you are often at the mercy of whether or not you do see the fortress. And you would have to probably make your way to an adjacent quadrant or something to kind of like high roll and randomly try to find the fortress utilizing quadrant knowledge. In Ranked, however, there is a pretty fun method that you can do to essentially make yourself in a position where you can scan the fortress. And this involves the usage of a pearl hang that I spoke about earlier. So, we know that at the bottom of Treasure, inside of the big cube area, a magma cube spawner is located. So, assuming that our trays are up here in the tower, let's make our way down to this treasure bridge. Open up our chunk borders to see a little bit of what we're going to do here, and take a look here. If you go inside of Treasure here, there actually usually is enough distance in this bridge that makes this chunk over 2 chunks away. Which means that if you go over here, toss a pearl into that area and lower your render distance to 2, you actually can hang the pearl and make sure you're past this chunk of border and to use FP+G to make sure that this is possible. If this is the case, go ahead and drink your fire resistance, boat all the way down into Treasure, and make your way here to the bridge. In this little indent is where the magma cube spawner is. Break it and pull back your pearl hang. You just hung all the way back to your Treasure Bastion, have all of your trades, and there is no longer a spawner in Treasure prohibiting you from scanning for the fortress. So now, from here, you can set up your settings and start scanning for fortress. What's up everybody? So basically for the purposes of understanding the Nether as a whole, I feel like it is quite beneficial to talk about the biomes themselves and what to expect when you see different Nether biomes and how they can affect your run. Starting off the bat, we got the Crimson Forest, which spawns with these crimson trees in sort of wacky terrain. These wood can actually be mined to give yourself like extra crafting table or wood from beds if you lacked wood from your overworld or had to use your wood for building at some point. These are pretty good, but just note that you cannot use nether wood for the purposes of making a boat. You can't make a boat with them. Hoglins also spawn in the Crimson Forest, and they could be a little bit of a nuisance or a food source. So note that about Crimson Forests. Near Crimson Forests, you usually find Warped Forests, which is basically the blue variant. Hoglins won't spawn here, and there is also netherwood that you can get from it, but Endermen can actually spawn in Warped Forests as well. This isn't really like a good example of the biome, they're typically much larger. But Endermen can actually spawn here, which is pretty interesting. In Warped Forest, there is also a chance that these Twisted Vines can spawn, which are pretty interesting blocks that break your fall. So think about that when you potentially use this to kind of mitigate your fall damage at times. If you're ever in the Nether and you locate this pretty clear biome known as Nether Wastes, this is essentially the best biome in the game for the purposes of speedrunning, mostly because it is very open. You don't get trees blocking your pearls, you don't have things blocking your view, and typically nether wastes like this are very expansive, very open areas that you can really throw pearls and make an incredible amount of distance with them. Nether waste biomes are really nice and are preferable when you're speedrunning. On the contrast, Soul Sand Valleys are extremely difficult biomes to traverse, mostly due to the fact that skeletons can spawn here passively, which are very annoying mobs to deal with in your speedrun, as you just shoot at you and you take free damage for no reason. The terrain is also mostly comprised of soul sand, which is a problem for you if you're first going to a bastion. If you're on the way to the fortress, this isn't necessarily the worst biome to find yourself inside of, because if you have soul speed boots, this can be sort of a benefit. It is still a pretty open biome compared to Warped Forest and Crimson Forest. You do have a bit of visual fidelity of where you're trying to go, but still, the mob aspect makes this biome a bit difficult to deal with. By far, the worst bastion in the speedrun is definitely Basalt Delta. I call this the Salt Deltas, mostly due to the fact that it's just complete garbage. I mean, look at this terrain, it's just an absolute eyesore. If you have to pearl over this, you're at risk of constantly taking fall damage. If you're trying, assume you don't have any pearls, and you're just trying to parkour over this, to try and get to that bastion that's just over there. It's incredibly weird. And funny that there is a bastion here. One thing that I wanted to mention is that bastions in the game never spawn in Basalt Deltas. They never do. They only spawn in any biome that is not a Basalt Delta. And we have an interesting example here, where the bastion is here, but it didn't spawn in the Basalt Delta. It spawned over here in the Nether Wastes, and it's just extending into the Basalt Delta. Since bastions are not meant to spawn in this biome in general, there is no logic for the Basalt Delta's terrain to essentially not overwrite certain parts of the bastion. So you see, even though the bastion is here, this Basalt Delta is sort of overwriting on top of the bastion. And as you can see, this is a big, big problem. As if you wanted to literally route this bastion, you would have to mine through and get to these stupid chests. I can't even find them. Oh wow, would you look at that? Nice. 4 obsidian. Wow, amazing. Basically, Basalt Delta is absolute garbage and will be a pretty big issue if your bastion is extending into it. Fortresses can spawn in Basalt Delta, but not bastions. Now you're probably wondering, isn't the Nether always this really cool place that you can find open areas and stuff? Well, my answer to you is kinda no. Usually you get situations like this in the Nether where you are entirely buried and there isn't really good directions to kind of run towards. As you see, I'm running over here. It's a little bit wacky open here. Not the best. So in cases where you are very, very enclosed, yet know that the direction that you need to go is through a wall or something, you have a couple different methods that you can deploy to get through it quicker. So, assuming that we have this flat wall here, I'll first show you a method of doing this without Pearl. But let's say you have your boat and you want to get through this wall in the Nether. Well, first of all, you can clearly mine through it 2 by 1 like this. But this method is a little bit slow. What you can actually do is mine 2 blocks flat like this for a bit. So you give yourself a little bit of room to do this. And follow my lead. Get into your boat and make sure that you're facing the opening within the wall. Hold forward and also hold your sprint button. So give yourself a little bit of room. You're going to sprint in the boat and hold the sprint. And then when you reach the wall, press your sneak button to get out whilst holding sprint at the same time. You will see that you're actually in this state of crawling, but you're sprint crawling. From here, hit the ground first before whacking your boat, because if you hit your boat with a fully charged axe hit, you will lose your sprint effect. And from here, you can just mine in a straight direction. You can verify that you're sprinting by jumping. You'll see that you actually run forward and jump. And this is an incredibly efficient way of making your way through a wall. If I did this for a little bit of time, you'll see that we are actually mining through the wall much faster than if we were mining a 2x1 strip mining tunnel like you saw me doing earlier. Keep doing this until you make your way on the second side of the wall, the other side of the wall here, and look, we are out. And oh wow, the fortress is over here. As you can see, this is a very clutch method to do, and it's very, very helpful, especially if you know that you need to go that direction, you don't have any other direction to go. Sometimes you just have to rip it and get through the wall. It's also important to do this sometimes to get to your second portal coordinates, because in the Nether, when you measure and calculate your eye, the second portal coordinates sometimes is going to be buried. And so in those cases, you probably will have to do a boat crawl anyways. There's actually another method of doing this that involves the usage of a pearl. So let's say you finished doing your bastion, you have pearls, and my second portal coordinates is somewhere inside of this wall. What you can do is mine 1 up, so mine 2 up from the floor here, mine as far as you can, and try to get used to doing this. It requires a little bit of practice, but if you sprint and throw a pearl, you will exit from your throwing animation to already be in a sprint crawling method. I messed that up, and there you go. Requires a couple times to get it right, but oh, I kind of got messed up by that gravel over there. But it does take a couple tries to get it right, but this also is very helpful if you want to get to your second portal coordinates. See? Of course, you do have to take a little bit of HP, and it does consume one of your pearls upon use, but if you have the ability to do this, it's slightly faster to set up this method rather than the boat crawl method. What's up, everybody? So I'm currently in this overworld, and I have my pie chart set to the buried treasure pie chart, which I would normally had set in my standard settings, such that every time I load into a seed, I will always have this up. Understanding that we are already done with the overworld, we no longer need our pie chart to be in the buried treasure pie menu. We actually pretty much want to be prepared to scan for a fortress should the need arise. So, in that case, we need to get used to kind of navigating throughout these menus pretty quickly in the pie graph. There are some times in the overworld where you want to change your pie chart from buried treasure to fortress scanning. And you can do this generally, when you are in your nether portal. In the animation, getting into the nether, you can actually change your pie graph. So the moment I get into this portal, I'm just going to quickly change over and see how quickly I can click through the numbers to do it. And just like that, we are already in the mob spawner menu, such that when we enter the nether, we already can kind of see whether or not there is a spawner right away. I'll raise my render quite a bit. You can see I already see a spawner, so I understand sort of a little bit about this nether. What's up, everybody? So I am currently within another Nether Fortress, and one thing I just wanted to mention is that wither skeletons are extremely annoying to deal with. They spawn pretty much en masse, and in the Soul Sand Valley, mob spawn rates are actually larger. So, if you're in a Soul Sand Valley fortress, your propensity of running into wither skeletons is actually greater. So there are times where you want to deal with withers in pretty efficient manners, and I'll show you a couple of different ways of doing so. First of all, if a wither skeleton is following you like this, if you place fire, they will actually avoid it. So in the middle of one of these nether bridges, if you place fire like this, they will be forced to go on the thing, where you can kind of now sprint, hit them off with knockback, and hit them off like that, without having to waste 2 axe hits on them. Another thing you can do is run up and try to aggro as many of them as possible. I see 3 over here, and I'm going to go on the side of this nether highway fence and build up 1, 2 on the side, such that they are 2 blocks under me like this. From here, they are very streamlined to just punch off. Sayonara, fools. If you're ever in a position and you see a lot of withers like this stacked on the side of a nether highway, you can actually go over here and look at this interesting little mechanic. If you place the lava on the side of this, they actually route into it and want to fall down for some reason. Don't ask why, I don't make the rules. And last but not least, if you don't want to deal with any withers at all, what we can actually do is entirely avoid them outright. I can already see that there are a couple withers over there, so if I wanted to not have to deal with them, I could just run through, and even though I aggro them, I can build a little bit of a blocker barrier here to block their pathing. This ensures that all withers from this direction will not be a problem. I also briefly wanted to mention that blazes obviously are pretty easy mobs to deal with. However, the reality is that a lot of different weapons are actually quite useful against them. I mentioned before in this video that you can kill blazes by using a stone axe or better with one full crit and one body hit, like this. See? 1-2 like that. Pretty simple. Is what it is. An iron axe is the same as a stone axe, but it has faster attack speed. It loads its crit a little bit faster, letting you do essentially the same thing. Iron swords are quite interesting, that when they're paired with an iron axe crit, if you quickly switch to your iron sword and charge its quicker crit hit, it actually is a little bit faster than using the iron axe in and of itself. So if I were, for example, to hit this blaze with a crit, and then hit this blaze with an axe crit. See what happens when I do 2 sword crits? See? Hit another one there, but just see. As you can see, this method, weaving between the iron axe and iron sword, gives you a little bit of a quicker way to kill blazes as well. And of course, the strongest weapon in the game is the diamond sword, which, when crit twice, literally just kills a blaze. Nothing is faster than the diamond sword for the purposes of killing blazes. Another thing I wanted to mention is the sheer incredible use of a looting sword. Of course, I mentioned this in the first tutorial episode, which was about ruined portal seeds and the fact that you can sometimes get looting swords from them. As you may guess, this increases the chance and also drop amount of blaze rods from blazes, which is an incredible time save. In order to efficiently use the looting sword, you first crit them with your axe, hit them half with your axe, and then crit them with the sword like this. See this blaze on the right? Boom. Half hit, crit. As you see, we got 2 blaze rods off that. Boom. Half hit, crit. 5. Boom. Half hit, crit. And as you can see, after killing 3 blazes, we got 9 blaze rods. That, ladies and gentlemen, is busted. So as you are going through the fortress and trying to find blazes, you know, sometimes, honestly, you're not always going to find a spawner really quickly. In cases where the fortresses are buried and the spawners are, like, very rare in their generation, because sometimes in fortresses only one spawner can spawn, and it might be a literal, like, brain rot to kind of run around and not be able to find it. So there is a way to actually manipulate mob spawns in the game. Kill this guy real quick. If you press F3 and look back to the M and C numbers that we spoke about earlier in the video, the M number is the one that describes hostile mobs, and M usually caps at around 70. You aren't usually going to see an M value greater than 70 in most cases. It actually shouldn't ever go higher than that. So if you have an M number of 70 here, this means that you basically have a maxed out amount of hostile mobs within your render distance. If you lowered your render distance down to an extremely low value, between maybe 5 to 4 to 3, you will see that the M value actually lowers. If I go even lower to 4, lower to 3, see how now within our low render distance, our M value is now 30. Once it's extremely low like this, it will try to spawn more hostile mobs around you to kind of supplement that. And what turns out happening is that randomly spawning blazes will also try to spawn. You will get more withers trying to spawn, but blazes will try to spawn as well. And as you can see, by manipulating our render distance, we actually made like 5 what is called stray blazes spawning around us. So now that we have these blazes, we can actually go ahead and kill them to get our rods. And this is known as dynamic render distance. One thing to note is that this method is more effective and also more dangerous in biomes that have higher mob spawn rates, namely the Soul Sand Valley Fortress, which has higher chance of mob spawning, as well as Warped Forest biome. So if you were to do this in the Blue Forest Warped Forest Fortress, you will also have a higher chance at getting mobs to spawn. In the cases, I'll wait for that sound to play through. In the cases where you have very low HP and not enough resources to finish the run in a fast way, because say I didn't have this cooked salmon, I only had 2 cooked salmon left, right? I would probably be in a situation where I would like to reset my HP and my hunger bar. Well, if you have extra beds, of course you need to have around 48 to 60 string from the Bastion in general. You make yourself an extra bed, you can actually go into the overworld after you made your first portal to calculate. You can actually go ahead and plop your bed down and set your spawn. Next to the bed, make a little 2x1 hole in the ground, and position yourself in the back corner of it. And if you have extra pearls, this is where you want to pearl, sort of where my mouse crosshair currently is. You go into the back corner of this block, and then you pearl in this sort of like middle up, kind of closer to the other opposite corner, but like basically here. Pearl a couple times. Oh, I actually got an endermite to spawn, but that's actually incredibly lucky that there was a endermite there. But all your items should be safe in this small 2x1 hole. You go ahead and pick up everything, and if you fall, pick it all up at the same time, your hotbar will actually preserve its position. And there we have it, everybody, the conclusion for our 3rd tutorial episode. I know that this tutorial took a little bit of time to get out. I have been dealing with a couple things over the last couple months, but I found my footing, made it through everything, and I'm very glad that I was finally capable of finishing this tutorial for you guys. I absolutely just want to say that I am so thankful for all of the support and kind words that all of you have been giving me. It really gave me the motivation and confidence in myself to push out this video. Definitely stay tuned for the 4th tutorial episode, which will be the finale to the speedrun. We will talk about the Stronghold as well as fighting the Ender Dragon, as well as even Zero Cycle, which I will try my best to explain to all of you in the best way possible. Good luck finding the Stronghold. Definitely practice a lot with eye calculation and make sure that you get that down to a T. I'm looking forward to seeing all of the responses and the progress you're all making in this speedrun, and I hope you all have a fantastic journey learning this game. It's honestly been super fun to make these tutorials for you guys, and I just want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, and good luck speedrunning, and until next time, take care of yourselves.